Welcome back to TerraQuip Talk, the podcast where we share ideas, stories, case studies, and interview professionals from different corners of our drilling and piling industry. I'm Mike Dobroda, and for the last 15 years, I've been involved with studying, selling, supporting drilling rigs and piling rigs from over 20 different drilling rig manufacturers from all over the world, right? Be it Italy, Germany, Finland, Asia. But anyway, here at TerraQuip Talk, what we're trying to do is to give a voice to our industry. And it gives us a huge amount of pleasure, honestly, to talk about drilling equipment, projects, or people. So if you're someone that shares our passion for drilling, please give us a thumbs up, subscribe, or leave us an interesting comment. Thank you for that. Or if you just have an interesting story and you want to be a guest on the show, drop me a message, please, and I promise I'll make it happen. All right, so what are we going to do today? Today, we're going to talk about a topic that's often overlooked in our industry, and that is the two main crowd systems that you can have on a drilling and piling rig. And that is the crowd cylinder system, which is often abbreviated as CCS, or the winch crowd system, which is often abbreviated as WCS. But first things first, what the hell is a crowd system on a piling rig? The crowd system refers to that part of the drilling rig that moves the rotary up and down, either by means of a cylinder, where we got the name from, cylinder crowd system, or by means of a winch, with the purpose of transferring that crowd force to the excavating tool through the rotary/Kelly bar assembly. Because you see, during the drilling process, the tool doesn't just turn. You also need to apply force on it. So how do you apply that force on your Kelly bar or on your auger? Simply by applying the force onto the rotary, then the rotary locks onto the Kelly, and then the Kelly transfers that force to the tool. Or in continuous flight auger, in CFA, it transfers that force through the snorkel or the extension bar, as some people call it. Actually, in some countries, they even call it a Kelly bar, although it could be confusing because Kelly bar is a different technology. But that's depending on where you are in the world, you might have different names for it. Now, normally there's two different types of crowd system, and that's, as I said, the cylinder crowd version of the winch crowd system. However, there is a third type as well, which is the chain feed motor. And just to give you an example how rare the chain feed motor is, out of about 50 different piling rig models that we sell, only one comes with a feed chain motor, and that is the MRP 750 from Marini, which was recently launched at Bauma this year in, I think it was April. This is also the only piling rig in the world that I know of that can be converted into a micro drilling rig. So it's got an anchoring kit, which allows you to transform it into a micro drilling rig. Now, in general, this chain feed motor system is used typically on anchoring rigs, so smaller machines for smaller diameter. But anyway, today my focus is simply on the winch crowd system versus the cylinder crowd version system, right? And I want to explore what the advantages are for each system, which manufacturers use what sort of system, what are they good at, for what kind of projects, right? And of course, to talk about how IMT has moved from a traditionally cylinder crowd system to now offering on pretty much every single model a winch crowd system as well. So let's look first at the advantages of the crowd cylinder, right? Depending on the manufacturer, the cylinder crowd is the most popular one. And if my estimations are right, I would say that in Australia, we've got about 60% of the piling rigs that come with a cylinder crowd setup, and the other 40% come with a winch crowd setup. So what are the advantages for the cylinder? Number one, it's a much simpler setup, right? Because one end of the cylinder is connected onto the mast, and the other part of the cylinder rod is connected onto the rotary. So this system is very simple, and IMT machines, as I said, traditionally come with a cylinder crowd, although in the last few years, I have pushed them really hard to give us the winch crowd system as well. And their target plan is to basically introduce the winch crowd system on pretty much every single model, except with a few small exceptions, right? Just to give you an example, right now, the machines that we have sold in Australia, the drilling units that we sold with the winch crowd system, or the IMT, are the A90, which is a 28-ton class machine, the AF135, which is a cat-based 30-ton machine, the A140, as well as the A215. So A215 being a 60-ton class machine. Next year, we're also looking at releasing the A290, the very powerful A290 in Winchcraft system as well. And of course, all of this is going to be with the advanced Winchcraft system version, where the Winchcraft is placed on the back of the mast. Small little story here. I know some of the A215 have been sold with the Winchcraft system placed under the rotary, which was a little bit more difficult to, it drilled perfectly, right? Absolutely great machine. There was no problem with it, but it just took a little bit longer to set up. Some of the operators that were rigging up the machine, they were hating us. So we have now fixed that problem as well by placing the winch crowd on the back of the mast, where the operator doesn't really need to touch the pulley system or to adjust the rope. It's just a simple setup. And now we're going to move on to advantage number 2 of having a cylinder crowd version, and that is the fact they're a bit more cost effective, especially if you don't need to do case drilling or if you don't need to convert in CFA as often, and the machine that you need is predominantly in bore pile version. Just to give you an example, when I talk about cost effective, what does it mean in terms of numbers? The A90, which is a 28-ton class machine, there's about $75,000 price difference between the cylinder crowd and the winch crowd, with the winch crowd being more expensive, of course. Then if you go to the 40-ton class machine or even the 60-ton class machine, the difference can be as high as about $150,000 on a 60-ton machine. But let's talk about advantage number 3, and that is the fact that it's less maintenance on a crowd cylinder. Being a simpler system, there's significantly less maintenance required on the cylinder crowd compared to the winch system. And with the cylinder crowd in general, there's not much to do except grease a couple of grease nipples every week or so, because there's no ropes to look out for, right? And it's a lot easier to rig up as well a cylinder version machine. For example, on a 40-ton machine, all you got to do is stand up the mast, put your tool on, and that's it. It's pretty much ready to drill. Another thing to consider is the fact that the cylinder doesn't rely on a pulley system, and the pulley system that's at the bottom of the mast can sometimes mean that you can have obstruction there going in between the ropes and the sheaves, such as rocks or the excavated material or the concrete, and that can easily damage the ropes. And of course, when you got a cylinder crowd, you don't have to worry about replacing the ropes. There are no ropes on it, whereas the winch, they either get damaged or they get worn, or simply after a number of hours, you just got to replace them because you just don't trust them. So you got to make sure that they're always in perfect conditions when it comes to ropes, because if one of those ropes snaps, the rotary will fall down and create huge amount of damage on the rig and potentially hurt someone. So be very careful with that. That's not to say that a cylinder crowd, though, cannot fail as well, especially if not properly installed. I actually have a story from about 12 years ago when one of our Sydney clients, it happened on an 80-ton class machine. I can't remember exactly what happened, but they didn't put the pin right, and that rotary just came down, all 6 tons of it. Thankfully, nobody was hurt, and the damage on the machine was not really that huge, so they were still able to fix it, but still it's something that you want to avoid. Then, what else about a cylinder? A cylinder doesn't need constant rope adjustment like the winch crowd does, right? Because with the rope system, what happens is the ropes, they stretch in time and they constantly need to be adjusted either through a tensioning cylinder, or if the tensioning cylinder runs out of stroke, what you got to do is you got to run it through a system that allows it to pull the rope and move it into a different position, which then tensions the cylinder. So with the cylinder, you got none of that, right? It's so much easier. Then number 4, it's easier to learn for the operator. So say you're a brand new operator, you don't want to be checked system machine. Not that a winch crowd system machine is too difficult to learn, but it's better if you go on a cylinder crowd, because you've got the points there that you lock the rotary onto the Kelly bar, which is pretty much the distance between the locks is the distance that the cylinder crowd can travel. So it's a lot easier, a lot less things to go wrong. Then what do we have? We have number 5, advantage number 5, and that is the conversion from standard mast to low headroom. So not to CFA, let's pay attention here. The conversion from standard height mast to a low headroom mast, especially when we talk about a 40-ton class machine, the conversion and the rig up is much easier. So what do we mean in terms of, let's say, the timing? If you've got a machine that's cylinder crawl version and you want to convert it into low headroom, it's on an IMT A140 is literally less than 4 or 5 hours, let's say. Whereas on a winch system, because it's got the long hoses on the side of the mast, when you replace the mast, you got to adjust the ropes. You got to replace your hoses with shorter hoses. Otherwise, they'll be dangling on the ground. They'll be dragging through the ground. So in low headroom, all you got to do is replace your cylinder with a shorter cylinder, remove the intermediary part of the mast, and replace the Kelly bar, of course, and a couple of hydraulic hoses. That's it. Bob's your uncle. You're ready to drill in low headroom. And just to give you an example, our A45, it converts that easy. Our A90, A140, A215, from cylinder crowd version to low headroom on a crowd ram system is under 5 hours. But if you have a winch crowd system, like I said, there's a lot more things going on. You got to replace the hoses and all that stuff, right? And that's not only on our machines, by the way. That's with any pioneering manufacturer out there, even with the premiums like the Bowers or the Liebers, because you got to replace those hoses. There's no other way. And one last advantage, which may not be very significant, but it's worth mentioning here, is the fact that a cylinder crowd system allows you to perform the maximum diameter capable on that machine along the mast, so in front of the mast, without decreasing it. Because what happens is on a winch crowd system, you've got the sheaves at the bottom of the mast, which will take away, they protrude about 150 mil in front of the mast. So therefore, you can't do, let's say, if your maximum diameter is normally 1,500 mil on A140, with the winch crowd system, you'll only be able to do 1,200 or 1,300 mil because of the sheaves. It's not a huge advantage, but if you have to do big diameter, maybe it is. That's it. That's more or less 5 or 6 advantages of having the cylinder crowd version machine, or the CCS as we call it. Now let's look at the advantages of having a winch crowd system machine. And why is the reason why 40% of the piling rigs ever sold in Australia, in our country, come with this system. Now let's look at the advantages of having a winch crowd system machine, and what is the reason why 40%, about 40% of the rigs ever sold in Australia come with this system. Advantage number one of having a winch crowd system is you're able to take the rotary straight up, all the way up the mast and down the mast through the entirety of its length, right? And what that gives you is greater flexibility to perform different drilling technologies, such as case drilling or CFA. So if on a 40-ton class machine, let's say on an IMT A140, the crowd stroke is about 3 to 4 meters. With the winch crowd system is about 10 to 12 meters. And what I mean by stroke, of course, the distance that the rotary can travel up and down the mast. I know for some people out there that are very experienced with this might seem boring, but for someone that's looking to come into the industry, or they don't have as much experience, maybe it's good information, right? So bear with me. And that takes me to advantage number 2, and that is the conversion from Kelly bar or bore pile version to continuous flight auger technology, or CFA. Because in CFA, you're required to travel all the way up and down the mast, obviously in order to be able to fit as much auger string as possible to reach greater depth. The rotary already does this in winch crowd system. So there's not much that you need to do when you're converting to CFA. Because all you got to do really is put your rotary in a drive sleeve to reduce it, insert your snorkel, and of course the swan neck and the swivel, install the lower guides, connect your main winch to the rotary, and that's pretty much it. You don't even need to install the bottom foot, the foot on the bottom of the mast, because the winch crowd system, majority of them, they come already, even in Kelly bar, they come with a foot. Maybe the only thing that you got to do is increase a little bit the surface of the foot. So it's literally just another larger foot that you need to put there. But the piston, the pad is still the same. So this is a massive advantage here. And that's why a lot of the contractors, they choose to go to a crowd winch system machine, especially in Australia, is because the conversion from Kelly bar to CFA is much quicker and easier to perform than on the crowd cylinder machine. Now, what do I mean in terms of the actual time? The time it takes a 40-ton drilling rig to be converted, let's say a cylinder crowd version, if you need to convert from Kelly to CFA, it'll take you, if you're really good, 2-3 people about 2 days. If you're new at it, 3 days, even 4 days in some cases. Whereas on a winch crowd system machine is literally in half a day. So of course, a lot of the contractors in Australia, they don't want to spend the money. Have 3 guys there. If you got a guy that's on $1,000 a day and you got 3 guys, $3,000 a day, multiply by 3 days, that's 9-10 grand, plus all the lifting equipment and all this stuff. So it costs a lot of money, right? So it makes sense if they have to go from Kelly to CFA back and forth that often. But with a cylinder crowd system, even if it takes 2-3 days, it's not all doom and gloom, because there's also the advantage to this one. When you convert from cylinder crowd version to a CFA type machine, you have to go to what's called a 4 power line pull system. That means your main winch shifts up and down the mast 4 times. So it goes from the main winch to the cat head, to the rotary, and then from the rotary up to the cat head, then down to the rotary, and then up onto the cat head, and then to the back of the mast. At least that's how we do it on the IMT A140 and on a lot of other models out there. So because you got all the steps to do, it's a bit more painful. But why did I say it's not all doom and gloom? It's because the capability is there. Because you shift up that main winch 4 times, you got a lot more pullback capacity, and you can do greater depths in CFA than you can do with a winch crowd system machine, right? What can also happen many times is the fact that in a combined line pull machine, so having the main winch pulling and the crowd winch, right, because it's a fast setup, sometimes the winches can run out of synchronicity, right? So they're not in synchronicity with each other, which means they'll be pulling when the main winch pulls, maybe the crowd winch doesn't pull with the same amount of force and it lags behind. So they create what's called a parasite power, right? Because it's not really a power, it actually takes away from the power. But anyway, that's with the older model. I'm pretty sure the majority of the manufacturers fix this problem nowadays. The way we like to do it with IMT is when the main winch pulls, the crowd winch releases the brake. And then if the pressure on the main winch goes above 250 bars, then the hydraulic oil, the third pump kicks in and the hydraulic oil travels to the crowd winch to help with that as well. So that's a system that IMT came up with in order to avoid the winches not being in synchronicity with each other. And since we're talking about conversions into different drilling technologies, of course, you got to talk about drilling with liners or with casing. And having a winch crowd system machine allows you to lift the rotary above casing segments, right? And the tool as well, especially if you have a shorter Kelly. And these casings segments, they usually come in 6, 7, 8, or even 9 meters. So it's really important to come above the casing and drill inside, right? It comes in very handy. So what did IMT do? Because as I said, traditionally, they were cylinder crowd version machine. Does that mean they didn't drill with casing? No, they did. And what they came up with is actually quite a brilliant system. They came up with what we call a 3-cylinder crowd system, which is, you can see in the video here that we're presenting, there's a single cylinder connected to the rotary, and the end of that cylinder is, instead of being connected on the mast, it's actually connected on the saddle, which is then, that saddle is connected to another 2 cylinders, which pulls that saddle as well as the single cylinder and the rotary all the way up the mast. So it doesn't take it all the way up the mast, it takes it to about 70% up the mast. So you still have the benefit of a winch crowd system, but with the simplicity of a crowd cylinder. IMT is all about simplicity, right? So they wanted a system that can still be simple, but still achieve the benefits of a winch crowd. This way, they were able to still do up to 9 meter long casing lengths, right? But it's also a system that's good if you want to do some limited CFA. If you want to convert to a quick CFA, let's say you have a job that's only up to 10, 11 meters, you can very fast convert it to a CFA by simply installing your snorkel and your lower guides. Just quickly, need reliable drilling equipment for your next project? At TerraQuip Drilling Equipment, we offer tailored solutions with top-tier support to meet your project needs. Contact us using the links in the show notes to find the perfect equipment for your drilling project. Now back to the episode. So while this 3-cylinder crowd system is great for driving casing, you can also use it in CFA, but a little bit more limited in the sense that Because the rotary doesn't travel all the way up the mast and it only travels to about 70% of it, instead of doing the full depth of 21, 22 meters, you can only do about 15 meters in CFA. But if you've got a small job out there and you need fast conversion, it's still good. Now, another advantage of having a winch crawl system is the fact that the winch has the ability to pull to about 50 to 60% on the same model, push and pull more than the cylinder crawl version machine. And that's simply because of the sheer size of a winch and the pulley system, the upper and lower rope, which is, of course, it being a double actioning system. And what happens is this can generate greater forces than what a simple cylinder chamber can generate, right? So when it comes to the ropes used on a winch crawl system machine, you have to be sure that you respect all the safety standards. And the general standard, I think in Europe, the standard is you got to have a factor of X3. In Australia, we go by a different standard, and we have to have a standard of 4. What does that mean? If your crowd winch, let's say, pulls with a total force of 200 kilonewtons, so let's say 20 ton, then your rope has to have a minimum braking load of about 3 times that, so 60 ton. That's in Europe. In Australia, it's even 4 times. So, for example, I was blown away the other day. I was looking at one of the manufacturers on the brochure, and they said they have an 18 mil rope for a winch that pulls with 240 kilonewtons, so 24 tons. So how the hell do they achieve that? Because, for example, on the IMT, we have 240 kilonewton push and pull on the crowd winch, but our rope is 24 millimeter. So either IMT has grossly overestimated and over-engineered this winch to work with this 24 mil rope, either the other manufacturer, I'm not going to say the name, has exaggerated a little bit the forces that they can pull with that winch, because something is not right. If the values are right, that means they're not respecting the safety coefficient. And I have to say this is absolutely paramount, guys. Please remember, even the smallest damage on the upper crowd winch rope needs to be addressed straight away. Because as I said, if that rotary comes down, if that rope snaps and that rotary comes down, it can create serious harm, hurt someone, kill someone, or create serious damage on the machine. So it's super important to have the safety standards respected. In the end, guys, either if it's a winch crawl system machine or a cylinder crawl system machine, it all depends on the drilling technologies and the projects that you have to complete. For example, if you're targeting, let's say, remote drilling for transmission lines where you only need to drill hard rock, big diameter, no casing, right? Then a cylinder crawl version machine is more than sufficient, right? And it's perfectly suited for this because of its simplicity. But if you have to, let's say, drill often from Kelly to CFA and convert, 1 week you got to be in Kelly, 1 week you got to be in CFA, then a winch crawl system is the system for you to choose, even if it's a little bit more limited and is not as capable as the 4-pound line pull CFA. And that's the reason why, because in Australia, I would say 50% of the jobs, or maybe 45% of the jobs, something like that, they're CFA, and 55, let's say they're Kelly bar, because it's such a huge need for CFA and for companies to be able to target different projects, whether it's CFA or Kelly. That's why I pushed IMT so much to give us the advanced winch rod system, because let's face it, you can't only make machines for 50% of the market. It just doesn't make sense. And I'm glad to say that now we have a total of 5 different machines that are coming in winch rod system that are already in Australia and they're working successfully. And we are able to achieve that versatility for our client. They want to have the opportunity to target most jobs available on the market and to adapt on the go without costing them 10, 20 grand for a conversion. They simply just don't want to price themselves out of the market. And I perfectly understand this. That's why I'm on your side as a client to get my manufacturers to give us the equipment that can be, let's say, as versatile as possible for your projects. Of course, there is a time and a place for heavy specialized machines, right? Like the cylinder crawl version, where we have clients out there that just drill Kelly bar only, bore pile only. They don't touch CFA. Sometimes they do some case drilling. They drill with casing, with liners, but in general, they just do bore pile. And of course, for them, they want a heavy hard rock machine specialized just in that. No winch crowd system, no bells, no whistles. But in conclusion, the winch crowd system sums up basically 3 benefits. It's got more power, greater versatility, and easier conversion in CFA. Whereas the cylinder crowd version presents the following advantages: simplicity, lower initial costs, easier maintenance, and easier conversion in low headroom. And now, which one is the winner between this? Which one is my favorite? Drum roll. That was a terrible drum roll. In my opinion, no matter which one you use, there is no winner because there's always going to be a compromise. There's no free lunches in life, guys. Let's face it. And with that, we're ready to wrap up another episode here at TerraQuip Talk. I hope you found this episode informative, and please let me know if you have any interesting technical topics you'd like me to tackle in this podcast. I'm going to go and research them for you, even if I don't know much about it. There's so many things we learn every day, right? Last but not least, please leave us a nice comment or subscribe and all that if you want. Thanks for tuning into TerraQuip Talk. If you enjoyed this episode, the best way to support us is by leaving a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And don't forget to subscribe on YouTube so you never miss an episode. You can also find out more from me on all social media platforms. The links are below. Until then, remember, if it's not turning, you're not earning.